Hey everyone, this is my video of trying to resurrect a Yamaha SPX2000 multi FX unit by reflowing it in my oven. These units have done very good service to me. They don't owe me anything. I previously had them reflowed professionally, which kept them working for about 3 or 4 years. However, they're now showing the same problem they had before, which is that the screen is the chassis. The screen just comes up blank. Obviously, there's no board in this one, but the screen just comes up blank. They don't boot. They don't pass any audio. So I've heard about people reflowing laptops and Xboxes and things like that in their oven, so I thought I'd give it a try. Obviously I've taken the board out already and I'm just prepping it here. I've never tried reflowing at home before, but I've got a good amount of electronics background, so I'm fairly confident that the plastic components on this board are going to survive. My oven is not very accurate, I've discovered. So inside I've put a little analog temperature gauge, and then I've put this piece of foil in to try and protect the top of the board from the worst of the heat. The only thing I'm slightly worried about are the connectors on the back, so I intend to cover them with a piece of tin foil to protect them from the worst of the radiant heat. Hopefully we'll get a result here. The other thing I've done, and tell me in the comments if you guys think this is a bad idea, is that I've given the whole board, both sides, a very light spray with a flux spray, focusing on this, which is the DSP chip, and one of these two is the CPU. I haven't worked that out, but before I disassembled it, all the power rails were correct. That was obviously my first point of call. I spent a bit of time trying to get these things going. So hope if this works, then I'll be trying it with the other one as well. I'm going to get it in the oven. I'm going to warm it at about 150 to 180 for a couple of minutes before ramping the temperature up. I'm going to aim for 205 or 210 degrees. Assuming that this board was constructed with lead-free solder, that should hopefully, with the addition of the radiant heat, at least soften the solder enough for it to make a new connection. So I'm going to very carefully put this in the oven now, trying to keep it level while it's in there. And let you know how we get on. Okay, so the board is now in the oven. It's probably very difficult for you guys to see, but we're at about 95 degrees on the thermometer, and I've got a stopwatch running here to tell me how long it's been in. I really don't want it to be in longer than about 5 or 6 minutes if I can avoid it, but I do want to get it up to a temperature high enough to melt the solder. So I'm going to let it, kind of emulating the soak phase of a regular reflow process. I'm going to let it just warm up at the slightly lower temperature for a while. I don't know if you can see there, but I've also put a piece of lead-free solder in the oven just to give me a visual indication of when the solder in there should be soft. Obviously I'm hoping that the temperature outside of this kind of cage of tin foil I've created will be slightly higher, so when that solder goes I know that I'm in the zone, and it shouldn't be long before the solder on the board itself has reflowed. Okay, the board's now been in for just over 2 minutes. We're still hovering around the 95 degree area. The only thing I'm kind of concerned about are the larger capacitors towards the back of the board, which again I imagine you can't see. I probably should have cleaned my oven for this video, but ho hum. So I'm keeping a close eye on them. If I see them bulging at all, I'll probably stop the process then. But they look good for the moment. When we get to about 3.5 minutes, I'm going to start increasing the temperature to get us into the zone we need to be. Looking at the solder that I've put in there, I can see that it's drooped considerably and the flux is starting to bubble out of the end, so certainly getting towards the temperature we need to be. Obviously this is the first time I've done this, so kind of flying blind a little bit, but I'm keeping a close eye on the flux that I applied to the board, hoping to see that discolour very slightly, and that'll tell me that we're at a sensible temperature. I don't really know how accurate this thermometer I've got in the oven is, so trying to use whatever visual clues I can take from the board itself to ascertain the temperature that we've got. Okay, so we're now just passing the 5-minute mark. Starting to get a little bit nervous. I'm watching the temperature gauge. As you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but temperature's slowly climbing. Still can't see any visual feedback from the board itself. The solder still looks like it's solid. Hasn't gone shiny yet, and I can't see any discoloration of the flux. The capacitors I mentioned earlier still look good. Fingers crossed. Temperature now just climbing up above 200. I don't think my oven changes temperature as quickly as I thought it would. I would like to have seen the temperature get a little bit higher by now. We're now at 6 minutes 20. Starting to worry about the heat soak. The solder that I put in there is still intact. Okay, we're at 7 minutes, which is longer than I wanted to have this board in the oven. Temperature is still only just over 200. And the solder I put in has literally just fallen away there, so I know that we're pretty much at the right temperature. I'm not going to give it much longer. I'm going to get this board out. Maybe another 20 seconds, bringing us up to 8 minutes, and then I'm going to start the cool down phase. That's us. I'll turn off the oven. Now the cool down is something that I wasn't sure about, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crack the door very slightly, let some of this flux smoke out. Let the board start cooling down. I don't want it to cool down too quickly, so I'm not going to open the door all the way. I'm just going to let the temperature out, let it drop. The thermometer's still up over 200. The board still looks good. There's a small amount of discoloration to the flux that I applied, which is great. It tells me that we got up to a temperature at least close to what we needed. I'm going to be honest with you guys, if this works, I'm going to be amazed. So here's the board out of the oven, still cooling down, but it's it's cool enough to touch now. Something I didn't show you guys earlier that again would love to know if you think is a good idea or not. I was very concerned about some of the surface mount components on the bottom of this board. So I've supported the board at the front and the back on a roll of tin foil, so that it wasn't resting on the surface mount components on the bottom. I didn't know whether the weight of the board would cause them to move around a little bit. You can see where the flux that I applied has discoloured slightly, which tells me that we're at a sensible temperature. We might have overshot slightly with this board. I might try and, if this one works with the other one I've got, I might try and either reduce the temperature or the time that it was in the oven. Obviously it ended up being in the oven quite a bit longer than I wanted, if I'm honest. All the connectors look really good. You can still read the text on them, so I'm quite glad that I put the foil over this area. The USB socket still looks good. All the pins on the MIDI and these switches still feel really nice. They still click nicely. They don't feel like they've been damaged by the process. I'm going to put this board back in the case and hopefully we'll have a working unit. Fingers crossed. Alright guys, thanks for sticking with me for this long. Here's the board back in the shell. I haven't bothered screwing it in yet. I've just connected it all back up. About to put some power on it and see what happens. Now that the board's cool, it still looks pretty good, so I don't think I've overdone the temperature. The big capacitors that I was a little bit concerned about do look like they might have puffed very slightly, so that is a worry. But you know, I had nothing to lose, so here we go. I'm going to plug it in. And power. Oh, hey! No battery. Ah, that's because I haven't put the battery back in. No way. Okay, let's put it in. Any of you that have got one of these units, you can put it into a service mode by holding next and utility and turning the unit on, which is difficult with one hand. And there's all sorts of tests you can do in here. So let's have a look. MCS. It's okay. DSP is okay. Wow. Well, I'm pretty blown away by that. I've got another one here. I'm going to give that a go now. Let you know how I get on with the second one, and we'll finish putting this unit back together and get some audio through it. Let you know if we've been a success. So, to round this one off, it is now December. I did the repair of these two units that you've just finished seeing in February or March. These have been in this they've been in with this console all year. Have been touring with me, lots of muddy fields and venues. They haven't missed a beat. They're currently fed from AES at 96k, and they seem absolutely fine. The analog inputs work. I haven't tested the MIDI, but not too fussed about that. So, a success story, and I was totally surprised that both of these units came straight back to life. Not really suggesting that everybody goes around throwing random circuit boards in their ovens, but as a last resort, it seems to work.